McLaren finally spoke. In the moment they broke their silence, it became clear that the Las Vegas disaster was far worse than anyone imagined. What initially looked like a simple technical breach unfolded into the exposure of a structural weakness inside their operation at the most fragile moment of the championship. The team's response wasn't defensive or diplomatic. It was the admission of a crew caught off guard by shocking new evidence that revealed behavior in the car they hadn't detected in practice, hadn't understood during the race, and only fully realized when the FIA's measurements left no room to breathe. Extreme porpoising, unexpected floor movement, aggressive plank wear. This wasn't bad luck. It was an operational blind spot that grew in real time and detonated after the checkered flag, stripping points from Norris and Piastri and dragging Verstappen straight back into the title fight. And just before we dive deeper, remember to stay with us. This story only gets more intense from here. McLaren's detailed explanation becomes even more alarming when paired with fresh telemetry. The traces from Norris's final laps erase any narrative of emotional drop-off or tire fade. His sudden collapse in pace was mechanical and strategic. The team had misjudged fuel consumption, forcing a driver expected to reach over 330 kilometers per hour on the Las Vegas straights to lift early, coast for long stretches, and brake sooner than normal. In the corner where he previously carried over 300 kilometers per hour, he now arrived significantly slower, sacrificing time just to preserve the mandatory 1-liter fuel sample required by the FIA. Without knowing it, as he protected one regulation, he breached another. With less fuel, the car sat lower, amplified porpoising, and deepened plank wear, exactly the behavior McLaren's models failed to predict. When these traces are compared with the post-race measurements, the pattern becomes clear. Unpredictable bumps, freezing temperatures, miscalculated ride height, and severe oscillation pushed both cars beyond legality by margins as tiny as they were decisive. McLaren's engineers later confirmed accidental floor damage on both cars, damage that worsened the already unstable platform revealed by the data. But what truly unsettles the team is how none of this emerged during practice. Las Vegas misled every simulation, a track surface evolving lap after lap, violent braking bumps, and temperatures far below expectations created conditions that simply didn't match the models. For a technical team, this is the most uncomfortable kind of failure, not a bad calculation, but a gap in understanding that only becomes visible when the FIA's gauge declares your car illegal. Meanwhile, Norris's lap time evolution chart painted a grim picture. From relative stability on lap 44 to a total collapse by lap 46, his performance nosedived. Russell, on older tires, began catching him at a rate that made no sense unless McLaren had switched into survival mode. And they had. The team realized their race model had drifted out of alignment, and in Vegas, even 0.04 millimeters is enough to erase an entire weekend. For Piastri, the drama took a different form, but led to the same verdict. He didn't face the late-race fuel crisis Norris did. His drive was clean, controlled, and exactly what McLaren expected. But the FIA's measurements killed his result instantly. His plank showed 0.04 millimeters of excessive wear in one section and as much as 0.26 millimeters in another, proof of the same bottoming wave that battered both cars. None of this stemmed from driving choices or risk-taking. It was mechanical, unseen, and unstoppable. Piastri's frustration after the disqualification wasn't with his own performance, but with a system that failed to protect it. And he understood something many overlooked. Fans obsessed over his gap to Norris, but the real danger was Verstappen, now level with him and carrying momentum. He sees the threat clearly. Norris will tighten up after this. Verstappen thrives when others crack. That's why he called for a reset, because in his eyes, the championship shifted permanently the moment Vegas ended. When Andrea Stella spoke, his tone carried weight rarely seen in technical disqualification cases. He didn't address only his drivers, he addressed partners and fans, acknowledging both competitive and psychological damage. McLaren knew exactly what was lost and how much the timing amplified the pain. 2 races and 1 sprint remain. Every marginal decision, from ride height modeling to plank stiffness to fuel estimation, now has championship-level consequences. And the shadow of Las Vegas looms over it all. Another weekend like that wouldn't just hurt, it would hand Verstappen the title without resistance. Stella made it clear the team must audit everything. Why porpoising correlation failed, why damage went undetected, why fuel models put Norris in jeopardy. None of these are small questions. These are the foundations of a title fight. And with so much at stake, if you're enjoying this deep dive, make sure you're following along because the final chapters of this story are only getting sharper. As engineers dug deeper, a pattern emerged. Las Vegas wasn't an isolated failure, but a convergence of multiple misaligned variables. Telemetry, timing deltas, throttle traces, FIA measurements all pointed to one conclusion. McLaren had pushed the car to the absolute limit, and the circuit shoved it beyond. Unpredictable tarmac, violent oscillations, heavy bottoming, simulation mismatch, and a late-race fuel-saving emergency, each factor alone was survivable. Together, they became catastrophic. In a sport where centimeters define overtakes, 0.04 millimeters defined everything. McLaren realized they weren't dealing with a single mistake, but with a web of small errors that amplified each other. The car ran lower than expected, hit harder than predicted, wore faster than acceptable, and Vegas punished all of it with surgical precision. This wasn't sabotage or manipulation. It was the price of operating so close to the limit that any bump, any misjudged model, any fuel-saving lap could flip dominance into disaster. With Vegas behind them and the championship recalculated, pressure flooded the McLaren camp. Norris, once stable, now carries a burden far heavier than the points lost. He knows the mistake wasn't his, but he also knows Vegas exposed how quickly momentum can turn. His tense start, his collapse at the end, the disqualification, these now become the psychological weight he must manage in Qatar and Abu Dhabi. Piastri, meanwhile, faces a comeback he never asked for, recovering ground erased by invisible mechanical forces. His target is no longer Norris, it's Verstappen, whose equal points and rising momentum threaten to sweep the final rounds. And Verstappen? He waits, he observes. He is historically the most clinical late-season driver of his generation. Vegas gave him no trophy, but it gave him opportunity, a crack in McLaren's armor, and he knows exactly how to widen it. What happened in Las Vegas leaves McLaren with no margin and no refuge. They cannot rewrite the race, cannot recover the points, cannot undo the FIA's measurements. They can only confront what the night exposed. A car fast enough to fight for a championship, but not resilient enough to survive the real conditions of the circuit. Now Qatar and Abu Dhabi become judgment days. Every screw must be tightened, every model recalibrated, every assumption questioned. The team must deliver a car both fast and legal, because from this point forward, perfection isn't optional. Norris defends more than a standings lead. Piastri chases a chance shaped by forces outside his control. Verstappen closes in, waiting for another microscopic weakness. McLaren knows one more misalignment, one more fraction of a millimeter could cost the entire season. And as we approach the finale, stick around, because what happens next will decide everything.